So I'm very thankful today to be joined by three amazing individuals. Sayre Brandt, Senior Philanthropic Advisor and Regional Director at the Oregon Community Foundation. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, everybody.
Emily Raymond, CEO of DevNW. Hey, Emily.
Hi, Matt.
And also Noreen Dunnels, President and CEO of United Way of Lane County.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Noreen. Good to see you. We'll be talking today about how each of their organizations are building on existing partnerships to leverage, mobilize, and support our community. We'll be taking questions today after we've had a chance to hear from each of our panelists. And to ask your question, we just ask that you use the QA button in Zoom, or if you're joining us live from social media, just put the question in the comment section and we'll get to everyone's questions and answer them from the panelists right at the conclusion of their opening thoughts. So Sarah, why don't you go ahead and kick things off?
Okay. Thank you, Matt. And I just want to express a special thanks to Matt with Onward Eugene and Brittany Quick Corner with the Chamber for responding to this idea of having a webinar about the responsive philanthropy. Really appreciate their willingness and quick turnaround on that. On behalf of the OCF family of donors, volunteers, nonprofits, and staff, I just thank you for this opportunity to talk with you today. This is a challenging and unprecedented time for Oregonians, and we're all in this together. In case you didn't know about Oregon Community Foundation before this webinar, I'd just like to take a minute to give you the big picture. OCF, as we're often called, is a public nonprofit foundation that puts donated money to work in Oregon for more than $100 million in grants and scholarships annually. For nearly 45 years, our grant-making, research, advocacy, and community advice solutions have helped individuals, families, businesses, and organizations to create charitable funds that improve lives for all Oregonians. We believe that the giving of time, talent, and resources from many generous Oregonians creates measurable change. Sabrina Parsons, many of you know her here because she lives and works here in Eugene and is the CEO of Palo Alto Software. She serves on the OCF board and does an outstanding job of representing the Southern Willamette Valley, but also, of course, serving the whole state. We have 5 offices around Oregon, including Bend, Eugene, Medford, Portland, which is where our headquarters is located, and Salem. With over 1,500 volunteers, our statewide board of 15 and 100 staff, we are all working safely from home to continue fulfilling our mission. This structure we have really helped us jump quickly into the fray of COVID-19. We're helping communities dealing with a public health emergency, economic turmoil, educational turmoil, and dramatic threats to basic service delivery. So, with input from this network already developed of volunteers, community leaders, policymakers, and donors, we've moved quickly over the past 3 weeks to provide resources to nonprofits. We're doing what we can to fill gaps in funding not yet met by the public or private sector. Our belief is that OCF must be here in the short term for this crisis, but we're also keeping an eye on the long-term needs for community and economic recovery and resiliency. So here's what's really happened. Over the last 3 weeks, our board of directors has approved $3.3 million in COVID-19 response grants to 111 nonprofit organizations around Oregon. These grants have come from discretionary, or you might say unrestricted funds that we have, from recent gifts that donors have given us specific to COVID-19 relief, as well as from generous donors we have who are stepping up by recommending grants from their OCF donor advised funds. Today, I want to tell you about 2 pooled funds we've created both of which are open to donations on our website, www.oregoncf.org. I'll also speak a bit to our donor advised fund grants. Our COVID-19 microsite is a great resource for any of you to stay updated on our response, to find out how you can apply for grants if you're a nonprofit or serve on the board of a nonprofit, and how you can give. First, the Oregon Community Recovery Fund, which we launched on March 17th in collaboration with many partners. Within 12 hours of launch, we had received applications from nonprofits to this fund. Some of our partners are foundations, like Cambia Health Foundation, the Ford Family Foundation, Meyer Memorial Trust, Nike Foundation, the Portland Timbers Community Fund, and the Standard Charitable Foundation. Some are businesses like A to Z Wineworks, Genentech, Hoffman Construction, and Moonstruck Chocolate, something I would dare say many of us are enjoying these days. Many of them are individuals and families who are giving what they can, and gifts of any size have been received and are greatly welcomed. You can see a list of all of these donors on our website. So we've begun deploying resources to community-based organizations at the front lines of the COVID-19 outbreak. We began about 2 weeks ago. In Lane County, our first round of grants directed $75,000 to United Way of Lane County for general support and $45,000 to United Way for its own COVID-19 response fund. Nearby, in other parts of the Southern Willamette Valley, grants were made to community action networks in Albany and Roseburg, and the United Way of Benton, Lincoln, and Lane counties, and the United Way of Douglas County. Since that first round, other Eugene area grantees have included the Eugene Mission, Family Relief Nursery, Food for Lane County, Looking Glass Community Services, South Lane Mental Health, South Lane School District, and St. Vincent de Paul Society of Lane County. On to the second fund. 1 week later, we launched the Oregon Small Business Stabilization Fund. As you know, without immediate assistance to pay operating costs, many small businesses vital to our communities are closing their doors and laying off employees. We wanted to provide a charitable resource to help nonprofit lenders cushion the impact of lost revenue until more state or federal sources are available and flowing out the door. Seeded with a $300,000 investment from OCF and also contributed to by business around the state, it's providing emergency capital to nonprofit community lenders, both urban and rural, such as CDFIs, economic development districts, and economic development agencies for Oregon cities and tribes. The fund will increase these lenders' capacity to offer low interest and no interest loans to small businesses. It will be active for at least 6 months and will be working closely with state and city partners to ensure that funds are well coordinated and deployed equitably across the state. One of the very first grantees from this fund was our own DevNW, and you'll hear from Emily Ryman, their executive director, in just a bit. Some of the business donors to our Small Business Relief Fund include Columbia Bank, Northwest Natural, the Oregon Growth Board and Business Oregon, Umpqua Bank, and US Bank. I'll just say a bit about donor advised funds. These are funds set up by donors with gifts to OCF. We invest their gifts and handle grant making for them based on advice that those donors give us. They're playing a really significant part too these days. Of the $3.3 million in COVID relief we've granted so far, $805,000 of it has come from OCF donor advised funds. And close to home, I'll just share with you one example. A donor in Eugene who has an anonymous donor advised fund recommended a $200,000 grant to Shelter Care for general support. It's going to be used in a myriad of ways, whether it's supporting their staff to work from home providing support for the homelessness prevention program, and even more support to help the unhoused and people with brain injury. We've received in total $7.5 million in gifts to our response funds, with donations continuing to come in. I just want to stop and ask you to take a minute about that outpouring of generosity. It's pretty incredible, and it's something that Oregon Community Foundation is very pleased and humbled to be organizing on behalf of the whole state. It would be misleading, however, if I did not report to you that we have received and processed 600 applications for over $50 million in grant requests to our COVID-19 relief funds, far more than we can adequately support. That's just the honest truth. We continue reaching out to our donors and other funding partners to encourage them to join our efforts, to act quickly, and to leverage our systems as well as financial resources. I've been guided in the last couple of weeks by something I came across in my own personal reading, a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. He taught that we're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. He said, whatever affects us directly affects all of us indirectly. What beautiful words those have been to me. So each day in our regions, in Eugene, and as part of the larger OCF, it's King's inescapable network of mutuality that has OCF's attention and our commitment. Please don't hesitate to let me know if you have any questions. I know you've got the opportunity to zing some my way later in this webinar. You can find my contact information and that of my fellow Eugene staff on this slide that Matt's putting up and on our website. Thanks again for this opportunity, and my sincere best wishes to everyone out there to be safe.
I guess I need to unmute myself. Thanks for those comments, Sarah. I personally was very, very impressed with how quickly the Oregon Community Foundation, which I believe is Oregon's largest foundation, is that right, Sarah?
In asset size, yes.
Yeah. To be the largest one and to be able to be that responsive and that agile and mobilize so quickly really impressed me. And I'm very, very appreciative for everything that you're doing around the state and here locally. Next, Emily, how are you?
Hanging in there, as I think we all are. I just want to echo, Matt, what you said about appreciation to the Oregon Community Foundation. The grant that Sarah referenced is what has enabled us to do the things I'm about to talk about. So their quick support of us as an agency has been really instrumental. And Sarah, if you could pass my thanks back to your team, that would be wonderful. Matt's going to share a couple of slides here this morning as well. I wanted to start with a very quick introduction to DevNW and Community Lending Works, for those who aren't familiar with us already. DevNW is a recent rebrand of an organization you may have known as NEDCO for many years. NEDCO had been around the Lane County area since 1979, started in the WIT, redeveloping that neighborhood. More recently had been focused on Springfield, downtown Springfield. DevNW does a variety of work helping low-income families and communities build financial stability and build assets. So we work with families on financial literacy, first-time homeownership. We work with neighborhoods on neighborhood revitalization. NEDCO went through a merger with another similar nonprofit, and together as a merged entity, we rebranded to DevNW. So that's the evolution there. Other folks might know us via Community Lending Works. So Community Lending Works is a separate legal entity, but formerly affiliated with NEDCO and now DevNW. And it is our community development financial institution. It's our lending arm. NEDCO founded Community Lending Works with an initial seed investment in 2011. So it's going on 9 years old now. specifically to do lending that supported the same community development work that DevNW does. So a CDFI is a federal designation. We're certified by the US Treasury, just like banks and credit unions are. In Community Lending Works case, we are just a loan fund, so we don't do the deposit side of a bank or a credit union, we just do lending. But the universal mission of CDFIs nationally is to provide community development, mission-driven lending that meets the needs of communities that are underserved by traditional banks and credit unions and other financing sources. Each CDFI looks a little bit different, but the most common lines of business are consumer lending, business lending, and affordable housing finance. Community Lending Works, when we started primarily doing consumer lending and micro and small business lending. We've just recently added the affordable housing finance, but it's a relatively small part of what we do still. Our core business area really is that consumer and small business lending. When we do consumer and small business lending, we're trying to reach people who are unbanked or underbanked or underserved by traditional capital. So on the consumer side, this might be people with no credit or with rocky credit. It might be people coming out of a bankruptcy or experiencing other financial hurdles. Folks who, if CLW didn't exist, might turn to the predatory lending market. On the small business side, it can look similar to that. It can be entrepreneurs who maybe have a rocky personal financial history or haven't done a good enough job separating their business financials from their personal financials. But it can also be businesses who are just maybe too new to walk into a traditional bank and get financing. Or maybe it's a business that needs a dollar amount that is lower than what a traditional bank wants to do. A lot of banks don't want to do business loans that are $10,000 or $15,000. They want business loans that are, $150 or $200. So that's kind of CLW's core audience. And if you can back up for just 1 second. When this crisis first hit, when we first started to realize that the state was going to be putting in public health restrictions around events and gatherings and business closures, things like that, we immediately started reaching out to our current business borrowers and just asking them what they were doing to prepare, what this was going to mean for their business, what their emergency plans were, how this was going to impact them, and what they needed from us, how we could be of help. And one of the things, well, I guess two things that they said very immediately was that they needed help with their existing loans. They were afraid they weren't going to be able to make those payments. And that they also needed immediate cash. Almost all of our businesses either had to scale down drastically or had to close to the public within the first 2 weeks or so of those physical distancing restrictions rolling out. The interesting thing was that to a business, they all understood why they needed to do that. They all understood the importance of the public health restrictions. So they were immediately shifting into the emergency business planning of what do we need to try to remain solvent through this crisis. And CLW, in response to that, we immediately started to put all of our own borrowers on individualized plans. So for some people, this was a complete deferral. For some people, they felt like they could continue to make interest-only payments. But we worked with them to provide whatever modification was needed. And then we started trying to figure out what could we do for that immediate cash need. Both for our borrowers and for businesses at large in the community, could CLW play that role of providing the kind of capital that isn't out there? Could we use the fact that we were nimble and responsive to try to get money out to businesses as fast as we could? So we came up with this new product. Matt, go ahead and go forward one. And we're calling it a small business emergency loan. And it's up to $30,000. We did make it a loan rather than a grant, but it's only 2% interest. Those payments are completely deferred for 6 months, and then they're interest only for another 6 months. And then the loan, assuming the business is able to survive, would be repaid over an additional 3 or 4 years. We pitched this idea to Lane County and to Eugene and Springfield to see if they would help us do a pilot. And they stepped right up to the table within a day or two of hearing this idea. So Lane County seeded the fund with $200,000. Eugene and Springfield each kicked in another $100,000. And we were able to launch the loan within about a week of the first conversation about what we might need. It launched on March 20th. We opened the applications. We're targeting businesses that were under 20 FTE as of last December. So we're looking at the size of the business pre-crisis. We're also asking, or we're doing a little bit of an evaluation to identify that the business was basically financially stable before the crisis. If there was a business that was really not viable before this hit, then they're probably not going to be eligible for this loan. And then we're also asking for an emergency business plan so that we can look and make sure that the businesses are that they are scaling down appropriately, that they're accessing all the possible resources that they can be, that it looks like they have a viable option for how they're going to stay solvent during this crisis. Understanding fully and being really transparent with businesses that we know things are changing by the day. So what we're asking is for their best guess on the day that they submit the application, and have they thought through some basic contingency scenarios. That $400,000 did not go very far. In the first 2 minutes, I think, that the application was live, we received more than 50 applications totaling $2.7 million. And the applications continued to roll in after that. We have more than 200 on a waiting list now. And I think the last time I looked, the total requests were approaching $5 million. So we were able to help 19 businesses in this very small first pilot. And we're now using that pilot to try to talk to other cities and counties who might want to duplicate the effort. And more importantly, to talk with the governor's office and legislature and our federal congressional delegation to try to share the information that we gathered around the need, the types of businesses, the industries that we're seeing, the kind of aggregate requests and most common uses that we're seeing. And we're really trying to use this pilot as a way to leverage massive additional funds so that we can duplicate it in other places and also reach many more Lane County businesses. We have applied for capital to that OCF Business Stabilization Fund that Sayre referenced. And I will say we can use all the help that we can get with trying to message to state and federal offices. So that's one really important way I think that people can be involved, especially at this point for businesses directly to reach out to your state legislators and your congressional members. There to hear personal business stories is really impactful. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now, certainly at the state level, about how best to utilize what we all know are limited resources. So I can't overemphasize the importance of individual voices from their constituents as our elected officials are debating their next steps. Yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide. So that's what we're doing on the small business side. Oh, I would add one more note on the small business front too. So this is our emergency loan. It's meant to be very quick capital to businesses in this moment in time to help them either cover expenses that aren't going to be covered by the federal assistance that's coming out, or probably more commonly to bridge the time gap that we know is going to exist before federal assistance is available. What we're finding is that we just don't, $30,000 is not enough. It's not enough funding to keep people on payroll, to subsidize payroll. So we're having to be really honest with businesses that like this can't take the place of unemployment. It can't take the place of some of the federal assistance programs that are coming out. But what it can do is provide you really immediate capital to pay your April rent, maybe clear a few invoices that you have outstanding from pre-crisis, maybe cover some utilities and some basic costs to just like hunker down into your smallest scale back plan, and then buy you the time to apply for all of the federal assistance programs that are coming out. We are already looking to the next product that we think we might want to introduce as a CDFI, and that is a relaunch loan. So already as we're talking to small businesses about this emergency immediate capital, we're also having conversations with them because they're already thinking about what they're going to need to be able to relaunch. So they're doing all the protective things they can, all the defensive things they can to scale down and remain solvent during this crisis. But in order to open back up again, they're going to need money for inventory and to rehire and basically sort of startup capital time or 2.0 to be able to open again. And so CLW is already having conversations about how we can try to capitalize that kind of a loan fund. All right, Matt, go ahead. I mentioned earlier too that Community Lending Works does consumer lending also. We've been a little bit more focused on the small business front here in the immediate first weeks of the crisis. But we also do have an existing portfolio of consumer loans and the ability to potentially introduce new consumer products as well. So our consumer loans range from, on the small end, we have a credit builder product that's just $300. It's a fully secured loan. People take out the loan and then we hold it as collateral while they make 12 months of payments, and at the end they get the loan funds dispersed to them. So it's almost like a forced savings program that builds credit at the same time. We also do loans for rental deposits for people who have gotten into housing assistance programs that only pay rent and not the deposit. We do some auto lending, we do some personal lending, we do some home repair lending. So all of that kind of stuff falls into consumer. When this crisis hit, we of course knew that the majority of our consumer loan clients, because they are low income, rural clients who oftentimes have, might be unbanked entirely or might be underbanked, they're the very people that are most hit by this crisis. So we just automatically declared a 2-month payment deferral. We didn't even wait for people to contact us because that would have been sorting through requests from hundreds of borrowers. And we decided it was our best guess that the vast majority of CLW clients were going to need that, so let's just do it. And then anybody who had one of those credit builder loans I referenced, we just automatically refunded to them so that they would be able to use that cash for emergency needs that they had. We're also in conversations now about if there is some sort of an emergency consumer product that we could introduce, perhaps to bridge the time between when somebody applies for unemployment insurance and when they get those benefits, because we know that that system is overwhelmed and there will likely be some weeks of delay, and we might be able to provide a product to help bridge that gap. What we're trying to balance here really carefully is the immediate need that we know a lot of low-income consumers are facing, and not wanting to create any kind of a bad debt cycle for them to get into in the long term. So we're really trying to figure out if there's a product that we could introduce that would balance those two needs and be really accessible for people and help have them be in a position to be able to pay it back and not have it turn into a negative thing. So we haven't decided exactly what we're going to do there yet, but we are asking for input and feedback from the community about what the need is and what that might look like. Go ahead, Matt. I just wanted to reference a couple things back on the Dev Northwest side of the house also. So in addition to the lending world that CLW plays in, we also, of course, are an affordable housing provider. And so we are involved in a lot of the current advocacy efforts, both on the rental side and the homeownership mortgage side. So we are working with our peers throughout the state and other advocates to encourage the eviction moratorium that's now in place and to encourage the strengthening of that. We're also working on the federal level to try to encourage the congressional delegation to strengthen the current foreclosure limitations that are in place. Right now, those don't cover nearly everybody, and so potentially need to be expanded. We're also at the same time advocating for as much rental and mortgage payment assistance as we can get. The problem with the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums is that those don't actually negate the need for people to pay rent. And so for the months that folks can't pay, it's great that they're not going to become homeless. But when those moratoriums are lifted, those rent bills and mortgage bills are going to become due. And right now, unless we have public officials acting to say otherwise, those are going to come due in one lump sum. So what we're encouraging our elected officials is to start planning now for that process and put into place either assistance on the front end to help people not get behind, to help make those payments in the intervening months, or to help catch up on the arrears before they have to resume making regular payments again. Or to allow those payments to be caught up over the course of maybe 9 months or 12 months or some extended timeline. Probably the right answer is going to be all three of those options in some combination. But we definitely need help on that advocacy front as well. And then the final note I would make here is that Dev Northwest does a lot of work with personal financial stability. We teach a lot of financial literacy classes, working with low-income families. And so our financial well-being team has very rapidly shifted the focus of a lot of our webinars, Facebook Live events, to be what we're calling financial resiliency. So the theme of those classes and workshops now are tips and tricks and strategies to try to weather financial crisis. Understanding that some of our traditional asset building strategies just don't make a lot of sense right now. What people need is help figuring out how to live through the day-to-day. So that's what we're trying to do on the Dev Northwest and Community Lending Works front. The support from our partners and from the community has been profound. I've been on more phone calls in the last couple of weeks saying, hey, we have this idea, we see this need, and all of a sudden, 8 hours later, we've got an entire team assembled and everybody's working on it in the same direction. So, shout out to the Lane County community, the Eugene Springfield community for that kind of a coordinated response. And I'm just really grateful that CLW and Dev Northwest can be part of it.
Emily, I've been completely dazzled by your organization over the last month. That Small Business Emergency Loan Fund did a lot of good. Certainly there, the demand out there far exceeded what I thought it was going to be. I mean, 50 requests in the first 2 minutes is daunting. But for those 19 businesses that you guys were able to extend a lifeline to, that's worth doing. And every little bit helps as we work together on this. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Next up, Noreen Dunnels. Thank you so much for joining us. You're actually in your office today, I just learned.
I am. Have to be here a couple of times a week. And so rotating with my CFO, which is absolutely fine. First of all, I just want to say thank you to Matt and the Chamber for really thinking forward with this type of a webcast. And I also want to thank, both of my colleagues here today who do astonishing work. And hopefully the folks that are watching this today will see how inextricably linked we all are. We all work together. We're all trying to improve the conditions in the community. And for that, I'm really grateful. So United Way of Lane County has been around. It'll be 75 years next year, 75th anniversary that we'll celebrate. United Way is focused on creating a better life for people here in Lane County. And a couple of years ago, our strategic direction pointed us in the direction of ensuring kids are successful in school and life. And so sort of thinking about how do we get upstream and prevent some social problems from occurring with 4 priority areas. One is family health and stability, thinking about housing stability and all the things that families need. Kindergarten readiness is another big priority area for us. Elementary school success, and when we think about that, we're really thinking about 3rd grade reading proficiency and what does that mean for our communities, our county, and how do we support that work. And then youth pathways to success, helping young people figure out what it is that they want to do and how they can contribute, thinking about all the different ways that that we can support that. So I'm just going to cut right to the chase with what we've been seeing and hearing, because I know that this is probably, for those of us who've been around for a while, one of the most challenging crises that we've experienced. So a few weeks ago, we started hearing about what the impact was here in our community. We quickly surveyed our nonprofit health and human service organizations, and because we wanted to hear what their immediate needs were, but also kind of what their anticipated issues might be going forward, as much as they could determine. So clearly, one of the biggest things that we heard was that many of the nonprofits were expecting or planning their big fundraising events this spring. In fact, many shared that they were expecting a 25 to 35% loss in revenue as a result of events that were canceled and revenue that they typically expect this time of year. So we also asked them, what kind of volunteers do they need? What kind of volunteer support do they need? Are there in-kind supports that we could help capture and communicate with the community? And so given that, we have stood up a couple of different parts of our website that identify some of that. And then, of course, we started convening weekly calls. And so to hear kind of what are the ongoing challenges, are there any changes in circumstances that people want to share, and how might we be able to help facilitate some support. In addition to that, a few weeks ago actually, we were notified by Pacific Source, who provided a seed gift of $50,000 for our COVID-19 fund. And then shortly thereafter, we got the great news from Oregon Community Foundation that they were not only going to support the COVID-19 fund, but they also were going to provide some resources to support our operations. And as most of you know, boy, you do need those resources to be able to run and operate anything related to sort of this action. So we also, I want to say, we were really blessed. We have a staff member who is co-chair of something called the COAD, which is Community Organizations Active in Disasters. And so really hearing right from the ground floor, what are some of the issues and needs that our nonprofits are experiencing, and how do we support those who have agencies that are serving the most vulnerable in our community. And so you'll see a page, thanks Matt for that. This is the Give Help, Get Help on our website. There's an opportunity for people who want to support the COVID-19 fund. And I will say that, boy, we've gotten lots of $10, $25, $50 contributions, lots of people who can support this fund in whatever means and whatever mechanism you can. We are happy to accept all gifts, and 100% of every gift, every donation that comes in is going right back out to the community. So we have had an application process for the last couple of weeks. We posted an application 2 weeks ago. The deadline for applications for the first round of funds was last Monday. This past week, we had a group of volunteers who serve as our reviewers, basically came together on Friday, reviewed 65 different applications for just about $160,000 in requests, and really took several hours to sort of review and sort of think about what are the most urgent needs in the community. And then they made some recommendations, which our board over the weekend basically had an opportunity to review and make a decision about approval. So the intention is that today, this afternoon, we are planning to notify those organizations that were funded in this first round. And again, we are planning 4 rounds or more, depending on the dollars that are in the fund. We'll get the dollars out. We asked agencies to provide us with an application, but also give us their bank routing number so we can get these dollars right out the door. If not this afternoon, certainly tomorrow morning, because that's the intention. Let's do this process quick, really identify those most urgent needs, and then get the dollars in the hands of those organizations doing this work. As I mentioned, we have at least 3 other rounds of funding that we are anticipating, and the application is on our website for funding. So if you want to give help, there's a number of ways. And Matt, maybe you can go back to that volunteer slide. People can not only support the fund with financial contributions, which we really appreciate and support, and then there are also opportunities for volunteerism. If someone is interested in volunteering, we have information about the ways that folks can do that. We also have an opportunity, again, for in-kind donations. You know, agencies have posted things like a need for diapers, of course, N95 masks, a number of different items in the community that will help those agencies that are on the front lines. And if you are looking for help, we want to make sure that you know we have a really robust part of our website that is also resource rich. So for instance, if you're a parent at home or you're struggling with the balance of trying to figure out how to care for your children, work remotely, we have a number of resources on our website, including tips for parents and families, How do you talk to your children about COVID-19? What are some activities that you can do that are educational? Although I think kids are virtually back in school this week, but what are the fun activities that you can also participate with children? And that's on the on our website under Lane Kids. There are just many other resources there if you like to check those out. And again, it's at unitedwaylane.org. I would also say, back to the sort of funding piece, the vast majority of programs or the requests that we got in this first round were really around food distribution and support, rental assistance, and a number of agencies are struggling with telehealth and telemedicine. How do they set that up? How can they provide some counseling and mental health support to families that they've been working with, low-income families, and others through some sort of telemedicine setup. So the needs are great and significant, and we look forward to working in the community and doing this work side by side with our partners, for which we are really blessed. I mean, when we talk about the narrative in Eugene and we think about what's one of the incredible values, the humanitarian value is really so evident now in the many ways that people are trying to support our community. And I think one more thing I want to say, and I didn't put a slide up for this, Matt, but is that the Small Business Administration has created a fund called the Paycheck Protection Act, CARE Act. Hopefully most nonprofits, we've been trying to push it out in multiple ways in the community. It is a loan forgiveness opportunity working with financial institutions to apply for those funds, and it actually can help provide some support to your employees for a period of time. And I know that we've had a number of nonprofits that have asked about that particular support and applied through their local financial institutions for those resources. So again, I just want to thank my colleagues and Matt for hosting this. I know we wanted to make sure we had some time for questions. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast, but I would just point folks to any of our websites for further information.
Thank you, Noreen, for sharing all those great tidbits. I've been working closely with your colleague, Sylvia Beria, and she's just dynamo over there. Been talking with her about those N95 masks that everyone is hearing about in the media, and also contactless thermometers to check temperatures. So very thankful for everything that you're doing in our community, and please keep going. Maybe I'll start with some questions. Emily, the first question is for you. Can you revisit what you shared about the relaunch loan? So this is one of those questions that's sort of looking towards the days ahead, and hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later in terms of when the rebuilding effort starts to take shape. What might those relaunch loans look like?
That's a good question. We are still trying to formulate that as we go. So please don't hold me to anything I'm about to say. I think they will hopefully be a little bit higher dollar amount than the emergency loans. So maybe up to more like $35,000, $40,000, $45,000, somewhere in there. They will have a little bit higher interest than the emergency loans, but still hopefully very competitive with the market. So maybe in the 6-7% kind of range. We're hoping to be able to make them either no collateral required or relatively low collateral requirements, because we know that that's a barrier for many entrepreneurs. We will make them play well in the sandbox with other assistance or other loan products that you have. So we can subordinate them to other things. We potentially, if you had an emergency loan, could roll that into a relaunch loan. So we'll try to make the terms of them very flexible. This is all of the terms that we will be able to put on those, and as flexible as we will make them, has to do with how flexible and how good a terms we can get on the capital that we can raise for that pool. So for example, right now, the annual CDFI financial assistance application is open. So this is one of our biggest funding rounds. It's a competitive grant through the CDFI fund as part of the U.S. Treasury. It just happens to be open in the spring. And so we are aiming our entire application this year toward that kind of a product, because this funding, if we get it, would become available like October, November. So it will be too late for the emergency products, but it could be good timing if the social distancing, physical distancing stuff carries on long enough to create that exact kind of relaunch product. So if we can get grants, if we can get really no recourse, low cost kind of loans into that pool, then we'll be able to structure them even more flexibly and low cost than we're thinking right now. But all of that is going to depend on the kind of capital we can put together over the next 3 or 4 months.
Thanks, Emily. We won't hold you to that, but I think it's important to talk about not just the immediate needs, but also some forward-looking guidance, so people
Absolutely.
can be thinking ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
Noreen, the next question is for you. I see that you answered this in the chat, but just for everyone who can't see the chat out on Facebook Live, the question specifically is, hey, there are folks who are working on filling out an application for grants United Way of Lane County today. Is there a specific deadline for folks filling out grants today?
Yes. So great. That was a great question. So the next deadline for application is next Monday, which is the 13th at 5 o'clock. And much like Emily and Sarah both acknowledged in their organizations, we got so many more applications for the funding than we have available. So every other week, so it'll be the 13th and then the 27th, and then I don't have a calendar in front of me, but May that, so every other week there'll be an application deadline. And then what happens is those applications get put together, the review committee reviews them, the board will make a decision, and then they are distributed the following week.
Thanks, Noreen. Hey, Sarah, we're having a little bit of trouble seeing you at the moment. I think your camera is pointed down and a little higher. Hey, there you are. Hey, this next question, I'm going to do my best to interpret it. It's really about, we hear a lot about the social distancing as it applies to our urban cores. But what we don't hear a lot about, which is a really important part of our community, is those folks who live in rural Oregon. So I thought maybe I could tee you up to talk a little bit about how OCF thinks about the whole community, inclusive of the rural parts around Lane County and around the state.
Yeah, I would be happy to say a bit about that. Because we're statewide, we definitely pay attention to the parts of our state, the vast swaths of our state that are outside of our urban areas. And I think that a key way that we do this, well, it's through networks, but one of the key ways we do that is through leadership councils we have, and through our own organization dividing the state into 8 regions. Matt, full disclosure, is a member of our Southern Willamette Valley Leadership Council. But each council has members from, anywhere from like 20 to 25 members who are from all over a multi-county area. So we are constantly seeking input from them about what are the needs in their community, what's going on. The very first town hall that we held was, I think, March 19th, in the first week that this really blew up in a big way for our volunteers and specifically for our leadership council members. And we're doing a series of town halls for different constituencies at OCF. So we're listening to them and finding out what are the needs, what's going on. I think I have the colleagues I have in our Eugene office. We also serve the South Coast, which is Coos and Curry, and that's pretty darn rural. And they are in touch with government, nonprofits, educational systems. We have another leadership council member from this region, Nancy Golden, who is connecting us with the South Coast Educational Service District, helping us work on some assistance they need at the educational level.
Nancy's great. I just saw she chimed in, so she's one of our attendees today. Hi, Nancy.
Yeah. Hi, Nancy. So my answer is networks. It's also a commitment. Like all statewide organizations, there's always a tension between urban and rural. It's just something you learn with and learn to, you live with, and you hopefully learn how to navigate it better and better as time goes on. We pay attention in our grant making to the balance that we make and give between grants to urban organizations and grants to rural organizations. So it's part of our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And if you look at each of those three key areas, paying attention to rural Oregonians helps us live that out.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts there. Noreen, you also had some thoughts about being inclusive to our friends in rural Oregon.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's much like OCF, we're focused on equity, and one of, really those organizations and people who are furthest from opportunity. And of course, we have such a significantly rural county. So, we received several applications for funding from different food sites from Oak Ridge to Junction City to, South Lane and Cottage Grove to Florence and Mapleton and all of the different parts of the county. And so we're really mindful of that. We want to make sure that we are reaching out not only to hear what their needs are, but also to be able to provide whatever kind of support it is that they need to serve their communities. So I just wanted to share that because that's definitely an important value of ours at United Way.
Thanks, Noreen. Emily, do you want to close that out? I think that there was some urban rural thinking as it relates to the emergency loan fund and some equity thinking there.
Absolutely. When we launched the first fund with the $400,000, there was $120,000 set aside for rural businesses, and that thinking really played out, and we will commit to maintaining that kind of a set aside as we get additional funding into the pool. Our guess was that if you were a rural business, and I think we'll be expanding this potentially to Latinx-owned businesses, if you're a rural business, if you're a Spanish-speaking entrepreneur, it's going to take you a little bit longer to hear through the regular communication channels about this opportunity. And it might also take you a little bit longer to put together your application materials. And we saw that play out in practice. We definitely saw in the date and time stamps of the applications coming in, the first probably half an hour was dominated by Eugene Springfield businesses. So if we hadn't had that rural set aside, it's entirely likely that we wouldn't have had a single rural business funded in that first round of funding. But we did have the set aside. We were able to help a good chunk of rural businesses, and we'd like to see that set aside continue going forward. In the funding that we applied for from the OCF Business Stabilization Fund, we committed to a 30% set aside for rural businesses and entrepreneurs of color.
Thank you. Any additional closing thoughts, Emily, as we wind down the hour? Anything?
I don't think so.
Go ahead.
I guess the closing thoughts are, for those that are listening, I think the most important role that you could play in our world right now is that help with advocacy that I talked about earlier. And one of the unifying voices that I think it's helpful for us to have talking to folks at the state level and the federal level is that time is of the essence, now more than ever. So I get the desire to sort of move carefully or be very strategic about the next steps, but I think sometimes speed is actually more important than elegance at this point in what we do. And if we can be unified in that, then I think it will be helpful.
Thank you. Noreen, your parting thoughts?
I just want to thank you and thank those who are listening. And it's an amazing community to live in. And again, we're all part of this. We're all supporting each other. The leveraging piece, hopefully you heard that, because it is, we're all working towards the same thing, a better community, people who are supported in a healthier sort of conditions.
Thanks, Noreen. Sayre, your closing thoughts.
Hey, Matt. Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this and reminding me when I pulled my laptop monitor down and stuff like that. First of all, philanthropy can't do it all, but we can do a lot. It is really our focus on bringing partners in on leveraging all the resources we have, not just money, but relationships and systems we have. So we do hope that this overview has provided the listeners with some reassurance and comfort that this important sector of America is doing what it can, especially here in Oregon and in Eugene and Lane County. On a little bit more personal level, we have a system now in place with the different teams that meet each week at OCF, sort of to end with, you know, what are your words going into the weekend or the week? And I just thought I'd tell you what your local Eugene team said today. We had our meeting this morning. We're going to be bringing this to you this week. Balance, stamina, breathing, humor, gratitude, and momentum. Those are the 6 words of our 6 team members. And I do hope you'll reach out to us with any questions. You can find us on the OCF website. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, you know, I find increasing focus on this word resiliency in the current time, and I think all of the organizations on this call and around our community that work in the nonprofit space, sort of working together, we are stronger together, and we're sort of sharing this burden together, and I think our community, broadly speaking, will be better for it. And just been really impressed with what all of your organizations have done, level of coordination, the level of action, right? Because action and making decisions, even if we have imperfect information, but making decisions, it is winning the day right now. So thank you so much for joining us. This video will be on YouTube in just about an hour or so. And have a great week. Stay healthy. My best to all of you.
Thanks,
Take care.
Matt.
Bye now.